Hi everyone, welcome to this another video on coding practice series. So today's challenge for you is to become a computer whisperer by completing another challenge with me. So there's the saying about being a computer whisperer is like you'll have the power to communicate with the computer by learning the skill of coding. So in the future, you may get better prepared for the job prospect and this kind of rising industry of knowing how to use computer to assist our life. Okay, let's get started. The challenge today. Let's practice some coding by dive into a problem like this. So if the input is a string that contains different strings, the output is the common prefix of them. So the challenge for you is to write a function to find the longest common prefix string among an array, a list of strings. So this is a LeetCode easy challenge. So the solution I'm going to show you are also from the official LeetCode site. And the reason why I'm creating this is for beginners and who are using Python and who want a more detailed version of explanation of how to solve this challenge. And then you may wonder, what if there's no common prefix? Then the second example here is you will return an output of empty string because there's no single common prefix there. So that's the two example, and that's the challenge we're going to solve together. And let's move to our code. So again, for those who are watching this coding practice series for the first time, you'll find that it looks strange. Maybe it's different. It's a different coding interface I'm using because I'm using RStudio to write Python code. That's just my personal kind of preference because I do write R and Python code in at the same time. So I preferably using I prefer this interface. So that's just some background knowledge for you there. But essentially, we're writing some Python code, and it's exactly the same when you are using some other tools like VS Code or something that you might be more familiar with. Okay, let's get started. So this is kind of like a comment. I'll just remind you what is our first example and a ideal kind of working case here. So if the input is a list of strings, the output should be the longest common prefix there. And that's why we named our method here like this. So we're going to create a method called longest common prefix so that any input which has to be a list of strings and the output should be a string, and the string should contain the longest common prefix among all the strings within this input list. Okay, so this is also something maybe if you are watching my YouTube coding practice series for the first time, this is object-oriented programming here. We're creating a class of solution. So all the solutions that have been created during the past coding practice videos, they're all called the same class, the same solution. However, it can have different instance and it has different methods. So each challenge would be a different method. And interestingly, today, I'm going to show you we actually need to create two different methods to solve this problem. So let's dive into more details about the content within this first method, which is our core method here. Okay, so first of all, we need to evaluate the input strings, which is called string, which is defined within this method as the kind of the second parameter. So because the first parameter is the self, the instance itself, and the instance is called self. And then the second parameter, the name of the variable is called strings, and it's restricted to a list type, and it's a list of strings. So that's just the kind of grammar of how to write this method, and specifically to kind of restrict the type of the second parameter. So as you can see, we already named the kind of variable as strings, so we can use it directly here. So strings is supposed to be the input. When the users like calls this method, it has to input, it has to contain a parameter like this. And that's the variable name of this parameter. So if this input is an empty list, we directly say there's no such thing as a longest common prefix for any empty list. And that's why, first of all, we want to evaluate the whether it's empty or not. And then if it's not empty, if it's something is there, we proceed to the next kind of line of code, which is we initiate this prefix. So this is what we're concerned about, and this in the end it's the returning output. So we first initiate this output as the first word in the string. So that would be flower in our example. So we first initiate to just say, let's say if the prefix is just the first whole word, and then for the next few words, we will loop them through. So for the second and third word, we will compare it one by one. So that's what this line of code means. So for range, the second position so for index 1, 2, and actually 3 in this case, because it only has a length of 3. It only has 3 words in this list. So for 1, 2, and 3, let's loop it through. So let's use another method that I will walk you through below. So that's another second method that is being used within it's defined within the same class, but you can use the later defined method for a different one. So we're using this LCP method for when we are defining our longest common prefix method. Okay, so how it's used is actually depending on how the LCP is defined. And as you can see, we can actually refer to the parameter to understand what this line of code is doing. So the self is just the instance. When you need to refer to the self exactly spelled as self and dot this method when you want to use this method. And then this would be the first kind of parameter, which is string 1, and this would be string 2. So we're essentially comparing prefix with a string with this. Let's say I is 1 for the first for loop. So we are essentially comparing prefix with which is initialized as the first word as flower to flow, which is when I equals to 1, strings 1 would be the second word in this list. So we're essentially comparing string 1 with string 2 because how we defined LCP here. So I'll go into this into more detail later, but essentially we're evaluating whether the first string is equals to the second string one by one, like position by position, because we defined within LCP, that's how we define it. So we're comparing the first word with the second word and find the common position, like the same positioned character, the longest shared character move from one position to another for the first two words. And then remember, it's a for loop here. So we're then comparing the same thing for flight. So we move to the next. Once we figure out the prefix, the commonly shared, longest commonly shared prefix for the first two words, we identify it. If there's nothing there's nothing common between those first two words, we can take a break. We can exit the loop and directly return the prefix, which would be a empty. However, if you do find something like a prefix, we will continue the loop. Instead of breaking the loop, we will continue to the second one. So I equals to first for the first loop, and then we equals to 2, and then 3 until the end of the list. So let's demonstrate the example of when I equals to 2, which is the second loop. So now I equals to 2, we already have a prefix, which has been after the first loop, which the prefix now has been, it's no longer the initial first word. Now it's actually the commonly shared prefix between the first two words. So it would be, in this case, it would be FL or FLO actually. So FLOW actually. So there's a lot in common between the first two words. So now prefix is flow. Remember I is 2 now. So strings indexing 2 would be actually a flight, because Python is a 0 index based. So the first word is index is 0, and now when I equals to 2, it's actually flight. So this is position 2, and flight is the corresponding value for that. So we're essentially comparing the commonly shared prefix between the first two, which would be flow, and we're comparing that prefix with the third word using the same approach defined below, which would be explained more in this when we are defining this LCP, which is again essentially finding the longest common prefix between this prefix, which is flow now, happen to be the same with the second word, but it's actually the commonly shared prefix between the first two. So what is the longest common prefix between that commonly shared prefix with the third word? It would be FL, right? So later we will again go in detail about this, but it's essentially finding the prefix that has exactly the same character, and at the same time it has to be the same position in the string. Okay, so if that's all you got in your input, we can stop there when I equals to 2. If you have more, I might equals to 3, and until the end of the list. So now we have one by one, we went through all the for loop, and we now have the prefix. And the prefix is not empty, because once we pass the first for loop, it's not empty. We can go directly and return the prefix now. And that brings us to the second method, which is LCP here. So the input would be toString, exactly like this. So when you call this method, you have to have this string1 and string2 parameter. So the first one is the prefix, the initial prefix. And the second one would be anything that's being looped. So we want to set a kind of limit of how many index we would like to look for, because if the string is actually only 2 characters, there's no way that the longest common prefix would be a 3 length of a string. So that's why we set a limit and we say we only care about any index that's less than the length of the shorter one, whichever string is shorter. And once that's what we're caring about, there's another constraint, which is we're evaluating whether the first one, the character in the first one is actually the same as the second one, and they should be the same position. So that's the common prefix is telling us. So we are, if this is the case, and if that's the kind of period of length of the string we are caring about, we move to the next one until this does not equal to each other anymore. And then at that point, we would find the longest one, the longest common prefix, because it no longer equals to each other. That means we should stop there. And then the returning, so remember the I would be the kind of the place we stopped. So the I would be a maybe probably large one. However, it's not the one that the condition of the two string does not equal to each other. So if we select from the beginning, from the 0, so 0 is omitted here, but it's the same by indexing the string here. So from the beginning to this I, which makes this equal condition the last one, that the last index, the last position that makes this condition the two string equals to each other, we want to select that. It's actually the same if you are using string 2. It's just because they share the same, they are equal to each other, so it doesn't matter which one you use, but the returning value is actually the longest common prefix. So we just solved it here, but it's only 2 string, while what we are working on is a longer, it's a list of more than 2 strings, and that's why we are using this defined method again on the previous method. And that's why we can return a prefix like that with the combination of 2 different methods. So after that, let's test if this is true. So by clicking this run current chunk, we run this chunk, and then after this, there's some test codes here. So remember, the solution is just a class. We need to create an instance first in order to test the different methods on the instance. So the first the first step is to create this instance, and then we want to call this method on a list of 3 strings. And once we run that, it tells us the longest common prefix. While the second example, if we run that, it tells us it's an empty string because there's no shared prefix there. Okay, so that's our challenge today. And as a summary, we actually defined 2 different methods and they are related. Actually, the second one is very helpful for solving the problem in the first one. So you can define interrelated methods within one class. And then we used loop, a for loop and a while loop to define the 2 different methods. We also used break to exit the loop and directly return the prefix. And also the while loop, the for loop we just talked about, and there is the if condition that is useful for us to determine if two things equals to each other, like that. Okay, so please look forward to hear our next week's challenge and practice coding with me. So please like it or subscribe this channel and stay tuned. Let's practice coding together and develop our skills and become a computer whisperer. Thank you.